Most gardeners think food only grows in full sun. But the truth is, some of the tastiest, easiest plants actually prefer the shade. And one of them doesn't need sunlight at all. From leafy greens to wild edibles, and even a few rule breakers, here are 10 edible plants that thrive where the sun doesn't shine. Most gardeners see shade as wasted space, somewhere you can't grow anything useful. They chase the sun, convinced that 6 hours of full light is the only way to get food from the ground. But that rule has exceptions, and big ones. Shade isn't a problem, it's a different ecosystem. Cooler soil, slower evaporation, and protection from harsh sunlight actually help certain crops thrive. Some of the best greens, herbs, and perennials grow better with less light. And one surprising group doesn't need sunlight at all. This isn't about tricking plants into surviving the dark. It's about discovering what already belongs there. Whether it's the soft glow under trees, the north side of a fence, or that damp corner everyone ignores, those are perfect environments for a few overlooked edibles. In this video, we'll uncover 10 plants that don't just tolerate shade, they thrive in it. You'll see how deep to plant them, how to keep them hydrated without drowning them, and how to make neglected spots produce real food. And we'll start with the most unexpected one of all, the crop that doesn't use sunlight, doesn't photosynthesize, and yet grows faster than almost anything else. 1. Mushrooms, the rule breakers of shade gardening. Let's start with something that technically isn't even a plant. Mushrooms belong to their own biological kingdom, fungi. They don't use photosynthesis, and they couldn't care less about sunlight. Instead, they get their energy by breaking down wood, compost, or other organic matter. That makes them the ultimate crop for shady gardens, or even spaces with no light at all. Some species, like shiitake and oyster mushrooms, fruit best in total darkness. Others, like wine caps, will happily sprout in damp mulch or rotting wood outdoors, even when the area gets bright light now and then. I get wild mushrooms every spring in my bright Florida front yard after a heavy rain. They pop up overnight, and while I don't eat those, identifying wild fungi is risky. It's proof that sunlight isn't the deciding factor we've been led to believe. Growing mushrooms intentionally is easier than most people expect. You can start with a pre-inoculated log, a ready-to-go grow kit, or even a DIY setup using straw or coffee grounds. Keep the substrate moist, protect it from drying wind, and maintain steady airflow. Within a few weeks, you'll see pins forming, tiny baby mushrooms that quickly expand into full harvests. The best part? Mushrooms don't compete with your garden. They complement it. You can tuck a log under a shady tree, grow a tray indoors, or even use them to recycle spent wood chips. They turn darkness and decay into food, and that's something no lettuce or tomato can do. In other words, if you think shade makes gardening impossible, mushrooms are your first clue that nature plays by more flexible rules than we give it credit for. 2. Lettuce, shade's cool customer. When gardeners think of lettuce, they picture bright, sunny rows of crisp greens. But here's a secret. Lettuce doesn't actually like heat or full sun. It tolerates them only long enough to bolt, turn bitter, and ruin your salad. If you've got a shady corner, that's where lettuce really shines. Lettuce thrives in partial shade, about 3 to 4 hours of direct light or filtered sun throughout the day. In these cooler conditions, it stays tender, grows slower, and holds its flavor far longer. The difference between sun-scorched and shade-grown lettuce is like night and day. One's bitter and tough, the other mild and buttery. To plant it, start with loose, well-draining soil rich in organic matter. If your soil feels like sticky clay or dry sand, fix the texture before you sow. Scatter seeds across the surface and press them in lightly. Don't bury them. Lettuce needs light to germinate. At most, cover with a dusting of fine soil, no thicker than a dime, or a pinch of damp compost to keep them from drying out. Any deeper, and they'll rot before they sprout. Water gently every day or two to keep the top layer moist but never soaked. Once the seedlings have 2 or 3 true leaves, thin them to about 6 inches apart for loose leaf types, or 8 to 10 inches for heads. If you're starting transplants instead of seeds, set them shallow, just deep enough to cover the roots and stabilize the base. In warm climates like Florida's Zone 9, shade is your ally. A north-facing bed, or one screened by taller crops, will help lettuce survive the heat waves that wipe out sun-grown patches. Even a balcony or shaded patio can work. Anywhere the temperature stays below the upper 80s. Harvest outer leaves as they mature, and the plant keeps producing. For head lettuce, cut the entire plant once it forms a firm core. Either way, expect fresher, sweeter greens than you'll ever find in a grocery bag. Lettuce may not be dramatic, but it's proof that shade doesn't mean surrender. In the right spot, it grows cleaner, cooler, and better than in the sun, and all it asks for is a little light and a lot of consistency. 3. Spinach, cool shade champion. If you've ever thought that edible plants must bask in bright sunlight, think again. Spinach flips that assumption on its head. While this leafy green can take sun, it truly excels when it gets partial shade, especially during the warmer stretch of the season. In fact, providing some relief from midday sun delays, bolting, and keeps the leaves tender and mild. Start by selecting a well-drained soil rich in organic matter. Level the bed, loosen it to about 18 inches deep if you're working a new plot, and mix in compost or aged organic matter. Then scatter the small spinach seeds across the surface. Cover them with no more than about 1/2 inch of soil. Just twice the seed width is plenty. Too deep and they struggle to reach the light. Too shallow and they'll dry out or be washed away. Keep the soil consistently moist, not soggy, and expect germination in about a week or 2 in the correct conditions. Spacing is important. Sow seeds about 2 to 4 inches apart in the row, with rows 18 inches apart. Once seedlings have true leaves, thin them so each plant has room to mature. In full-size plantings, aim for 4-6 inches between plants. Shade helps in 2 important ways. First, it slows down the heat-driven switch from leaf production to flowering, bolting. The moment leaf flavor turns bitter and productivity collapses. Second, it allows the soil to stay cooler and the leaves more tender. Many garden guides note that spinach will grow in partial shade, with around 3-4 hours of direct light, but will still perform well. As the plants mature, pick outer leaves regularly to encourage continued growth. When you see the stem begin to elongate and the plant looks like it's sending up a flower stalk, harvest everything or pull it out and reset the bed. Its leaf production phase ends there. In short, spinach may not be headline drama, but it's a dependable edible for those less sunny spots. Plant it shallow, keep the soil even, give it some shade relief, and you'll harvest crisp, mild greens long after sun-loving crops have wilted in the glare. 4. Mint, the invader that thrives in the shade. If there were a plant that laughs at neglect, shrugs off low light, and still rewards you with handfuls of fragrant leaves, it's mint. This herb doesn't just tolerate shade, it exploits it. Mint can grow in anything from partial shade to nearly full shade, and in damp corners where most herbs give up. That makes it perfect for the gardener who wants something edible and unstoppable. There are dozens of varieties from spearmint and peppermint to chocolate mint and apple mint. All have the same basic needs: moisture, airflow, and room to spread. Room, however, can be a dangerous word. Mint spreads aggressively through underground runners, so unless you want it taking over your yard, confine it to a container or an isolated bed. Plant mint in soil that drains well but never dries out completely. It loves consistent moisture and cool roots. Seeds can be slow and unreliable, so most gardeners start with cuttings or nursery transplants. If you do grow from seed, press them lightly into the surface and barely cover with a thin veil of soil, no more than 1/8 of an inch. Keep the surface damp until sprouts appear, which usually takes about 2 weeks. Once established, mint needs little care beyond water and containment. Give each plant at least a foot of space if you're growing in the ground. In pots, a single plant can fill a 12-inch container within a season. It doesn't need rich soil or fertilizer. Too much nitrogen can even reduce flavor concentration. Trim stems, often to encourage branching and prevent them from getting woody. Every few weeks, snip off flower buds before they open to keep the leaves tender and aromatic. Shade-grown mint tends to develop smoother, darker leaves and a slightly milder flavor than plants in full sun. But that's not a flaw. It's a sign of slower growth and higher oil retention. Those oils are what make mint perfect for teas, desserts, and savory dishes alike. One caution: if you're the kind of gardener who loves to let things spread, mint will happily take that invitation and run wild. Don't underestimate it. Keep it confined, keep it cut, and it'll reward you for years without ever needing a sunny spot. 5. Parsley. The patient shade performer. Parsley doesn't shout for attention. It isn't flashy or fast, and it doesn't flood your garden with instant gratification. But give it time and a bit of shade, and it'll reward you with one of the most useful herbs you can grow. This plant does something most gardeners don't realize. It actually performs better when it's protected from harsh sun. Full sun makes parsley's leaves coarse and short-lived, while partial shade keeps them soft, deep green, and flavorful for months. 2 to 4 hours of direct light or filtered sun through taller plants is plenty. Parsley can be grown from nursery starts, but it's one of those crops that tests your patience when started from seed. The seeds contain natural germination inhibitors, which means they take their time, often 2 to 4 weeks, before sprouting. To speed that up, soak the seeds overnight before planting, or even for up to 24 hours if you're in no rush. Then, sow them about 1/4 inch deep in loose, moist soil. A very light dusting of fine soil or compost is enough to hold them in place. Don't bury them deeply. Parsley's tiny seedlings can't push through packed soil. Keep the top layer evenly damp until the seedlings appear. Water with a gentle stream, something that won't disturb the surface, and avoid letting the soil crust over. Once plants reach a few inches tall, thin them so each one has 6 to 8 inches of space. The roots are long tap roots, so if you're planting in containers, make sure the pot is at least 10 inches deep to accommodate them. Parsley prefers steady moisture, but not soggy conditions. If the surface starts to dry, add just enough water to dampen the top inch of soil. In areas where the sun is intense, partial shade keeps the soil cooler and prevents premature bolting. Harvesting is simple. Start from the outer stems first, cutting near the base. The inner shoots will continue growing and replacing what you take. A single parsley plant can produce for many months, even through light frosts. Flat leaf types, Italian parsley, offer stronger flavor, while curly varieties hold up better as garnish. but both appreciate shade and even temperatures. In the right spot, parsley becomes a quiet workhorse, steady, reliable, and endlessly useful. It's not a diva plant. It's a long-game player that thrives on patience and partial shade. 6. Ginger, the underground shade lover. Ginger is one of those plants that looks exotic but behaves like an old friend once you understand what it wants. It doesn't crave blazing sun or fussy care. It just needs warmth, moisture, and protection from the extremes. That's why it thrives in partial shade, where most garden vegetables struggle. The edible part of ginger isn't a root at all. It's a rhizome, a thick underground stem that stores energy. Above ground, the plant sends up slender stalks with bright green leaves, but everything important happens below the surface. Ginger loves filtered light or morning sun with afternoon shade. Direct all-day sun tends to scorch its leaves and dry out the soil too fast. Start with a plump, fresh ginger piece from the grocery store or garden center. Choose one with visible eyes or buds, those small nubby growth points. Before planting, soak it overnight in warm water to wake it up. Then bury it 2 to 3 inches deep with the eyes pointing upward. If you're planting in a pot, use one at least a foot wide and equally deep, since ginger spreads horizontally before it grows downward. The soil should drain well yet hold moisture. Think rich and crumbly rather than sticky or sandy. Water whenever the top inch starts to dry out, but avoid letting it sit in standing water. The rhizomes will rot quickly if they're kept soggy. Once the shoots appear, you'll notice how slowly ginger grows at first. It's not lazy, it's methodical. It spends the first couple of months establishing its root system before it begins adding much visible top growth. That's why consistent moisture and steady warmth are key. You can harvest small pieces known as baby ginger after about 4 to 5 months. For mature, fully fibrous rhizomes, wait 8 to 10 months, usually when the leaves begin to yellow and die back. At that point, you can lift the entire clump, cut off what you need, and replant a few pieces to start the next cycle. If you're short on outdoor space, ginger grows beautifully in containers near bright windows or shaded patios. It doesn't demand attention. It rewards consistency. Few plants make better use of partial shade than ginger. It hides underground, quietly converting moisture and time into flavor. And while other crops fade under low light, ginger stays steady, slow, and generous. 7. Turmeric, the golden root of the shade garden. If ginger is the workhorse of shady gardens, turmeric is its bright golden cousin. They grow almost identically, but turmeric rewards your patience with a deeper flavor and a vibrant orange interior that's as beautiful as it is useful. It's another crop that proves you don't need full sun to grow something extraordinary. Turmeric prefers filtered light or light shade. Morning sun followed by afternoon protection is ideal. It'll grow in full shade too, though it may take a little longer to mature. The trade-off is worthwhile. Shaded plants tend to have plumper rhizomes and richer color because they don't dry out or scorch in the heat. To start, buy fresh turmeric rhizomes from a market or garden supplier. Look for firm pieces with several swollen fingers and visible buds. Before planting, let them sit in a warm, bright spot for a few days until you see tiny green or white sprouts emerging. Then plant them 2 inches deep, buds facing up, in loose, rich soil that drains well but stays consistently damp. If planting in pots, use wide, shallow containers at least a foot across. Turmeric likes to spread more than it likes to dig down. Keep the soil evenly moist during active growth. A light surface cover of fine compost or leaf fragments can help retain moisture, but don't bury or pack it down. Airflow around the surface is crucial. Turmeric hates stagnant, soggy soil. In cool climates, start your rhizomes indoors in late winter and move them outside once nights stay above 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 15 degrees Celsius. In warmer zones, you can plant directly outdoors once the soil has warmed. The leaves resemble gingers, tall, spear-shaped, and lush. It takes about 8 to 10 months for the rhizomes to fully develop, and you'll know they're ready when the foliage starts to yellow and die back. To harvest, loosen the soil gently and lift the entire clump. Snap off what you need, then replant a few fingers for next year's crop. Wash the rhizomes thoroughly, and if you want that deep golden powder you see in stores, slice and dry them before grinding. Turmeric's beauty lies in its patience. It's slow, steady, and thrives quietly in partial shade. While other crops chase the sun, turmeric proves that sometimes the richest rewards grow right beneath your feet, out of the spotlight. 8. Ramps. The forest treasure of deep shade. If there's a plant that truly embodies the phrase edible shade, it's the ramp. Also called wild leeks, ramps grow in the cool, damp understory of hardwood forests, places where sunlight filters through in brief, gentle patches before vanishing again. They don't just tolerate shade, they depend on it. Ramps are perennial members of the allium family, related to onions and garlic, but their flavor is sharper and wilder, an intense blend of both. They appear early in spring, often before trees leaf out, and by the time summer arrives, they've already retreated underground. The shade protects them from drying out and gives them the long dormancy they need to return year after year. If you're lucky enough to live where ramps grow naturally, you'll find them carpeting forest floors, often near stream banks or mossy slopes. For gardeners outside their native range, they're a challenge but not impossible. They need rich, humus-filled soil that stays moist but never flooded, ideally with a pH around neutral. Think of deep leaf litter rather than open garden soil. That's their comfort zone. To plant ramps, start with bulbs or dormant roots rather than seeds. Seeds can take a full year just to germinate, while bulbs will sprout the following spring. Set each bulb 2 to 3 inches deep, spaced about 4 inches apart, with the pointed tip upward. Water gently to settle the soil, and if your climate allows, layer just a thin covering of shredded leaves or fine compost to keep the surface damp. Ramps grow slowly, and patience is non-negotiable. It can take 3 to 5 years for a newly planted patch to reach harvestable size. When that day comes, resist the urge to pull the whole plant. Harvest only a few leaves from each clump, or lift every third bulb at most. Overharvesting is the reason wild ramps have become rare in many regions. The payoff is worth it, a unique, garlicky onion flavor that chefs prize and foragers guard like treasure. Ramps remind us that not all food needs sunlight or speed. Some of the best things grow quietly in the shadows, waiting for those who understand that patience and shade can feed you just as well as light. 9. Ostrich fern. The ancient green that grows in the dark. Some plants were made for shade, and the ostrich fern is one of them. Long before people began sowing gardens, these ferns covered cool forest floors where sunlight barely reached. Today, they remain one of the few edible plants that not only survive, but thrive in deep shade. Their young shoots, known as fiddleheads, are a true seasonal delicacy, prized for their crisp texture and earthy flavor. Ostrich ferns grow naturally in damp woodlands near streams or rivers where the soil stays moist and rich in organic matter. They don't tolerate drought or hot, direct sun, but filtered light or full shade suits them perfectly. If you can mimic those conditions, they'll establish a self-sustaining patch that returns every spring. Plant ostrich ferns from bare roots or divisions rather than spores. which take years to mature. Space them about 2 to 3 feet apart. These plants grow large once they're established, with fronds reaching up to 5 feet tall. Set the crown, the base of the shoots, just 1 inch below the surface, firm the soil lightly, and water thoroughly. A thin layer of shredded leaves or compost helps the soil hold moisture, but avoid piling it thickly. The crowns must breathe. Keep the soil consistently damp. Ostrich ferns prefer steady moisture over heavy soaking. If your soil dries quickly, water lightly every few days rather than flooding it. Over the first season, focus on root growth rather than harvesting. Give the plant time to build its energy reserves underground. Once mature, each crown sends up several tightly coiled fiddleheads in early spring. Harvest only 2 or 3 from each clump, leaving the rest to unfurl into full fronds. That balance keeps the plant healthy and productive for decades. To prepare fiddleheads safely, always cook them, either by steaming or sautéing, since raw fern tissue can cause stomach upset. With care, an ostrich fern patch can become a permanent fixture in the shaded part of your garden. It asks for little: moisture, organic matter, and patience. In return, it delivers a crop that feels wild, ancient, and entirely different from anything else you'll grow. The ostrich fern is proof that edible gardening doesn't stop where the sunlight fades. Some of nature's oldest foods are still waiting there, quietly unfurling in the shadows. 10. Violets, the edible flowers that bloom in deep shade. Most flowering plants crave sunlight, but violets are different. They bloom where few others dare. These small, heart-leafed perennials are among the best edible plants for deep shade, thriving under trees, beside north-facing walls, or in any spot that feels too dark for vegetables. They're proof that beauty and utility can coexist, even where the sun barely reaches. There are hundreds of violet species, but the common wild violet, Viola ceroria, and its cousins, is the one most gardeners encounter. It spreads by short runners and forms a soft carpet of green, dotted with purple, white, or sometimes yellow blossoms. Every part above ground is edible. The flowers add a faint sweetness to salads and desserts, while the young leaves are mild, slightly tangy, and full of vitamins A and C. To grow violets, start from nursery plants or divisions taken from existing clumps. Seeds are an option too, though they need light to germinate. Press them gently into the surface of damp soil and cover with no more than a paper-thin layer, just enough to keep them from drying out. Consistent moisture is key. Violets prefer cool, rich soil that never bakes or crusts over, and they'll quickly colonize the shaded spots where other plants struggle. Space them about 8 to 10 inches apart for a ground cover effect, or tuck them between stepping stones and shady borders for living color. They don't need fertilizer, and they actually resent disturbance. Once established, leave them alone, and they'll quietly fill in on their own. You can harvest the leaves at any time, but the best flavor comes from new spring growth. Pick flowers just after they open, before insects find them. Rinse gently and use them fresh for decoration, or crystallize them with sugar for an old-fashioned confection. The leaves can be eaten raw, sautéed, or dried for tea. If violets spread too far, trimming the runners or transplanting extras keeps them in check. They're generous plants. Give them a patch of shade, and they'll handle the rest. Violets close out this list perfectly. A humble, shade-loving edible that turns dark corners into something alive and beautiful. They don't demand sunlight, fertilizer, or fuss, just a place to grow, a bit of moisture, and appreciation for the quiet power of plants that thrive in the shadows. Most gardeners think of shade as a problem, a place where nothing grows and sunlight goes to waste. But if this list proves anything, it's that shade is full of opportunity. From the forest floor luxury of ramps and ostrich ferns, to the calm persistence of parsley and lettuce, to the underground brilliance of ginger and turmeric, even the darkest corners can feed you if you know what to plant. Sunlight may drive the obvious growth, but life in the shadows runs deeper, quieter, and just as productive. These plants don't fight for attention. They adapt, survive, and thrive where others can't. That's the real secret of shade gardening. It isn't about compromise, it's about balance. If you've written off the dim side of your yard as dead space, don't. Turn it into a hidden harvest. Whether it's mushrooms sprouting in darkness or violets blooming under your trees, you can grow beauty and food in places most people ignore. Thanks for watching Ground Truth Gardening. If you learned something new, or if you're planning to reclaim a shady corner of your own garden, hit subscribe and stick around. We've got plenty more plants to uncover, myths to bust, and gardening truths to challenge.